Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Soul School. I really do think of Jeff as my teacher. Ever since we met, there hasn't been a moment that's gone by that he didn't say something that I didn't absorb, that I didn't retain, that I didn't learn from. He's just one of the most remarkable people that I've ever had the privilege and pleasure to know. That said, class is in session and the teacher is late. But here's the good news. Okay, I just spent 10 minutes searching for these glasses. So I'm starting to act my age. Hi, I just said nice things about you, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much. I'll have to go back and listen to them now.
I did. No, well, what I said is that I consider you my teacher. That, I mean, not only do we mentor each other, but ultimately, I don't know what you learn from me, but I know that I learn a great deal from you. So what I basically said is class is in session, the teacher is late.
It happens sometimes, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It does. And, for the poor souls who are watching tonight, all I can say is I'm sorry you're down to one Christmas tree. Easter is right around the corner. I don't know what you should expect, how you should deal with this change of season, scenery, etc. But just roll with it. Just roll with it. Because the top, all up above where you just missed the chiming of the clock. But it's all lights up there and bunnies. So really, Jeff, we've got both seasons completely covered. Right. We're doing great. We're doing great.
We got birth to resurrection all in one.
And in one, I know. Yep. And considering chances are really, really good that it happened in the reverse, that Jesus Christ was born in the spring and died in the winter. If you really go back, through the chronology, through the date keeping of the time and so on and so forth. But anyway, that aside, I have my coffee and my coffee cup says here, let me swipe off the lipstick. It says, sorry, I can't. Mercury is in retrograde. Now, nice. I don't know if Mercury is in retrograde or not, but it felt that way tonight. So that was the mug that I chose for show number 1 on a Friday night on KGRA. Now, there was one thing last week. Oh, I put my glasses on so I could see that you had said that you were ready at 9:01. That's not technically late. That's fashionably late.
And I fancy myself a fashionable gentleman. So
you are, yeah. The hoodie gives you away every freaking time. Yeah,
I know, right?
Okay, so anyway, last week I found our discussion, our conversation, and would certainly invite any student that was not there in that hour of a little less than an hour of class in Soul School last week to go back and visit it. Because I think ultimately the conversation that we have tonight, having so much bearing on our previous session, as it were, will be even more illuminating. But one thing that I wanted to say last week that I didn't, and as soon as we were done, I was like, oh, I just wanted to say that one funny thing that I say about this subject at hand. And it's just kind of a running joke in the family that we all use. And it's basically, I know how to be perfectly happy even when I'm miserable. My mother taught me how. My mother can be joyous and miserable at the same time. And to be able to integrate all of our emotional makeup into one solid mass of wow, mind-blowing emotional expression, I think is actually a good thing. There's it might be a family joke, but it's also true.
Mhm.
that I know how to celebrate life, be joyful and blissful and happy, even if it's just something that the stupid little, well, I'm sorry, not stupid. There's nothing stupid about Princess Peanut Buttercup, but she does some stupid things sometimes, like really silly things that make me laugh hysterically. And she brings joy into my life. And, if everybody had one point, I tell her every day that she is the center of my universe. I would suggest that everybody try to find that point of light, that center of the universe where everything is happy, everything is joyful, everything is perfect, and everything is love. And that's what she is in my life. No matter what is going on around me, she can bring me back to true north instantly, instantly. And so I wanted to make mention of that. Also, when the show was over last Friday night, um, we talked for a moment, I believe, online after it had gone off the air. And then I said, I got to take the dogs out. They got to go for a walk. But
Mhm.
before I left the room, I turned the TV on and the volume up so that when I came in, I could pick up on my 11 o'clock hour show that I watch every night. And when I walked back in the room, I don't remember. I think it was Stephanie Rule was interviewing Savannah Guthrie from NBC from the Today Show, and she always does the MC work on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Everybody knows who Savannah Guthrie is, and she's written a book about her faith, which is profound.
Mhm.
And I had it, I wrote it down and then I misplaced it. I couldn't find it. So I'm just going to paraphrase what I heard when I walked in the door. And based on everything that we had discussed,
Yeah.
for our hour together that night, and I was done for the night, it was exactly what I needed to hear. There was no coincidence about it.
Yeah.
And I do have it written down, and one of these days I'll put it up on something and credit her. But basically, what she was saying is you get to a point in your life where you just have to wonder, if you're feeling hopeless or if you're feeling despair, is it robbing you of your joy? Is it robbing you? Like, what do you have to do to circumvent that mindset?
Yeah.
And if you have to live with it, but live joyously in spite of it.
Yeah.
So, as I walked in, I heard her say, I'd rather be someone who lives my life with faith and hope and love.
Mhm.
And then at the end, have been wrong about everything, but lived my life that way. And I'd rather live that way than live hopelessly and in despair
Mm.
and been right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's almost a Pascalian wager in some way, right? I mean,
It is. It
and
is.
Pascal's wager, of course, if you're looking at it in a religious context, is I would rather live as though, let's just boil it down simply. I'd rather live as though God were real, and at the end of the day, it turn out that God was not real because of what that makes me aim towards and how it makes me live my life rather than assume God does not exist and then potentially face the consequences. So, but that is a form of a Pascalian wager. Like, hell yeah, it's much better to live life in hope, trusting that God, the universe, that source has your back, that good things are coming, that the best is always yet to come. It's
Yeah.
better to live like that and to end up be disappointed, but to have the entirety of your life up until the end when you realize that maybe that wasn't the case. It's better to have a life that is marked by joy and anticipation and trust than it is to have an entire life that's marked by the opposite and then come to the end and realize, oh, I didn't have to live this way.
Yeah. Optimism versus pessimism
Hmm.
is the darkness and the light.
Yeah.
It is. It's and some would even say the good and the evil.
Mm-hmm.
that pessimism is so dark in its worst incarnation. It is cynicism. And
Yeah.
when you've become cynical, when nothing can lift you up out of that mindset, that's someplace that I never ever want to go. I would rather be duped by someone, assuming that they had the best of intentions, and then proved wrong, at which point I make a decision about what place, if any, that individual has in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I can answer that quickly. It's only happened a few times, and those people have no place in my life, because once you lose your trust, your just innate trust that people are at their core, at their root, good, and really bear no, cast no aspersions, bear no witness against you, are just kind
Mm-hmm.
and loving to their core. And I assume, I do, that most people are like that. Most are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of walking wounded out there. God knows they find me first. They do. They're like, oh, she'll listen to me. Yes, I will. And that's the thing. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
will.
Yeah.
And what I do is just wrap people, you've seen it yourself, just wrap them in my arms, just embrace their pain and whisper to them to let it go, that I won't hold on to it, but they don't have to carry that burden anymore, and just tell me whatever they want to tell me. And invariably, I find myself with weeping souls in my arms over and over and over again, no matter where I go.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that connection with people that is pure of heart, that allows them to release what it is that troubles them, that allows them to free themselves, liberate themselves by speaking their truth to someone that they know is trustworthy, that they know what they tell me is never going any farther, that they know that I am there to help them and to heal them and to love them well. And that is the joy of what I do. Even though I love sitting and writing for endless hours, going off in the zone, losing, you do the same thing as an author. I know you do the same thing, where you're just gone. You're just out there. And the only thing that you realize is when the light begins to change, that, the day is waning into evening. I love that. I love being with other people more, and that exchange that takes place. And sometimes it drains me, I will admit. 18-hour days are long. But it enriches my soul in so many ways to know that even just a few minutes spent with someone who needed to either decompress or, share their thoughts or express themselves as who they really are, who, like fundamentally, essentially who they are, is so inspiring to me. Inspiring is, it's like a revelation. It's like a religious experience, even though, I don't practice any specific religion. I'm not affiliated with any singular religion, but it's spiritual connection.
Yeah.
So you and I had written back and forth a little bit this week, and, I've pretty much covered, kind of picked up where we left off last week. And you had some very good ideas that I thought would be ultimately enriching to our viewing or listening audience. So why don't you share with them what you shared with me, and
Yeah.
we'll pick up from there.
Yeah. Well, and last week too, hi everybody, by the way, sorry I was a minute late. But last week too, at the post the show, when we were texting and you sent me the quote that you sent, and I had remarked back to you, like, yes, it's much better to take a Kierkegaardian leap
Yes.
of faith, right? And Kierkegaardian leap of faith is in Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. Kierkegaard had like three stages of life for him. There was the aesthetic, which is where we live essentially just by the senses. Then there's the ethical, which is where we try to rule our lives according to ethics. And then there's the religious. If someone doesn't like that word, it just means it's that stage in your life where you take a leap of faith into something that transcends both the aesthetic and the ethical, and in some ways is a synthesis of both of them. And so when you'd said that, I had said, yes, it's much better that we take a Kierkegaardian leap of faith and trust that the world is good, trust that there's beauty in the world, whatever, than it is to live in anger, bitterness, resentment, et cetera, et cetera. And then it dawned on me that actually the name Kierkegaard means essentially graveyard or a church garden. So Kierkegaard, garden, kirk, that's comes from church. It's where church comes from. So the word actually meant like a church garden or a graveyard. And last week we had talked all about the transformation of death to life and graveyards becoming gardens. And so it was just a great
Garden of Eden, at which point
Yes.
I made some smart ass remark back about let's revisit the Kierkegaarden of Gethsemane or something like that.
Right.
Or the Kierkegaarden of Eden.
That's where it was. Yep, exactly.
That's where it was. That's kind of where we left it until you messaged me this morning. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's going to fit perfectly with what we're already talking about.
And so it was just one of those great synchronistic moments of full circle, completing the circuit that I love so much, that always seem to come in the wake of the show and the things that we talk about. Yeah. And, you had mentioned what you had just said, and you had mentioned it in the context of taking a leap of faith, right? Mm-hmm. And so this week I had been thinking about, I've been meditating on the idea that Paul Ricoeur, who I've mentioned several times on the show, who's a French philosopher, that he had concerning the masters of suspicion. And for Ricoeur, the three masters of suspicion were three semi-modern philosophers. It was Freud, Marx, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Nietzsche. And so for him, these three represented like an injection of suspicion into the thinking of the Western mind that called into question everything that we once took for granted and that was once just simply a given. And so in the way that Ricoeur broke it down, Freud introduces the idea that underneath everything, specifically religion, is some sort of childhood trauma, usually somehow correlated to sex or something along those lines. So that underneath everything, there's like some kind of childhood trauma and or sex. That's kind of the Freudian concept. And that's a oversimplification, but it still is kind of there. For Marx, Karl Marx, everything came down to class struggle. Everything came down to the haves and the have-nots, proletariats, et cetera, et cetera. And beneath everything was a class struggle, and it was all about money. Yeah. For Nietzsche, underneath the surface, everything was about power. And he called this slave morality. And he thought of Christianity. In his critique of Christianity, he said Christianity is basically like it's feigned virtue, because you're saying to people, oh, yeah, you might persecute me and I'll die forgiving you, but one day you're going to go to hell, so I still win. So in his mind, it was kind of like under the surface, there's actually this resentment and this bitterness, and it's actually a striving for power. And your belief gives you this like unconscious one-up on everybody else, and you think you're better than them. And so then that allows you to, but then you can cover it over with this plastic smile of virtue and be like, I love you, bless you, I forgive you. But underneath,
it's really pseudo altruism.
Right. Yeah. And then underneath, there's definitely a dagger hidden in the smile and in the kind words, because underneath you're thinking, yeah, but you're going to go to hell one day. So and so he calls them the masters of suspicion, because their philosophies bring out the fact, they're some of the first who helped us really consider the fact that a lot of times, and not just religion, but philosophy, humanity in general, we're often having a sleight of hand trick played on us, right? Mm-hmm. We think we're seeing one thing, what's actually going on is something else. There's another motivation underneath. And so this philosophy, and I've heard individuals like Rick Roderick suggest that Darwin should be added to the masters of suspicion because, evolution kind of gives rise to a naturalistic explanation for things that we would otherwise give the supernatural credit for. And so something like pattern recognition, pareidolia, seeing faces in wood grain, feeling a presence in the room. Well, Darwinism would tell you, well, that's just a survival instinct because, if you're an ancient human being and you hear a breeze in the bushes and you assume it's just a breeze, but it ends up being a saber-toothed tiger, you're toast and you don't pass on your genes. And so those who assume breezes and bushes are just breezes don't pass on their genes. But those who assume a breeze in a bush is a saber-toothed tiger, even though sometimes it turns out to be a breeze, well, they pass on their genes. We are the heirs of those who assume agency when there might not be agency. And so Darwinism might be another way to kind of burst a bubble and give rise to suspicion to where you're like, oh, well, maybe what I thought to be a supernatural presence, it's just a kind of pareidolia. It's sensing something where there's really nothing. It's the whole idea of you never wake up in the middle of the night and mistake a robber in your room for a pile of clothes in the corner, but you often wake up in the middle of the night and mistake a pile of clothes in the corner for a robber. So that would be a way that Darwin could be added to the masters of suspicion. Anyways, the point is he was saying that.
1 second, Jeff.
Yes.
Did I send you the article last week by the professor that, hold on, I've got to find it. I think I posted it. I'll double check, but it's the death of the theory of naturalism. And basically he has proved that the supernatural exists and spirit exists. And I had to read it 3 times to get through it. I mean, it's like intellectual gymnastics, but I just wanted to make sure and say it, on the show who it was. And I will post it again. Oh my God, I did not send it to you. Oh my God. Okay, well, I'll post it after the show and I'll send it to you and we'll do next week's show on it because it's amazing. But anyway, I wanted to let you get back to that, but I just wanted to interject one thing. In a way, there's kind of a duality about, what you're discussing. And one part of what you're discussing is from the neck up, cerebral, and logical. The use of deductive reasoning has, made our gene pool come to the place where it is, and or inductive reasoning, logic, and the development of that has nothing to do with our spiritual side. The other side, the duality that we all live with, is that place, I think, where, the title of the show tonight is A Decided Leap of Faith.
Yes.
And I think that ultimately we decide, we get to an age, we come to a place in consciousness and in our emotional maturity where we realize that happiness is an inside job and that we have to decide how we want to live our lives and then do our best to stay on that trajectory.
Yes.
And not to dismiss or shun or even question the reality of what is negative or ugly or bad or cruel in this world.
Yep.
But to be happy in spite of the world that we live in and the behavior of other human beings toward each other. And the only way that we can make a good positive difference is to be positive, that we can make a difference.
Yes.
So that's all I had to say about
that. No, I agree 100%. And that's kind of the setup. That's what the Masters of Suspicion is really kind of a setup for, because basically the Masters of Suspicion represent the adolescent phase of those are my words, not his, but more of like the adolescent, teenage, inquisitive, college age years of the development of the collective. That this is kind of where we're questioning our parents' philosophies on life, and we're questioning all the things we've inherited. So like collectively, the injection of these suspicions, it's sort of that phase. If you view the development of humanity like you would an individual life, that would sort of be that stage of being where we're questioning everything. We're suspicious now. And so now, we are suspicious of everything. Just look in the religious world. Those three suspicions: everything's about money, everything's about power and resentment, everything is about sex and childhood trauma of some kind. Those are the three suspicions that come up whenever we, let's say, think about anyone with any kind of religious proclivities. We're like, they just want my money. It's a power grab. There's some kind of weird sexual thing going on. We are always suspicious in those three arenas, and we don't know why. But the reason we are is because it's ingrained in us. Yep, the philosophies of these individuals, not to say that they were wrong, but their philosophies are now airborne. We don't know where we inhaled it. So you don't have to know Freud, Marx, or Nietzsche to be infected by this suspicion, but we are all the same because it's airborne. And so we could see it as a negative, right? We could see it as a negative, but Ricord didn't see it as a negative. He said that it's actually a good thing. They're aiding us in our maturity. They're presenting us with a challenge that is aiding us in maturing as human beings, because before your theories are tested, well, they're just theories. They're untested theories, and that's really all they are. And at any moment, they could crumble and fall apart on you because they've not been tested. But once they're tested, well, if it falls apart, you find something else, or you find a way to repurpose what fell apart on you and how to turn it into something else. And so that's why Paul Ricord, who I've often cited on the show, talks about a second naivete, which is after suspicion, after deconstruction, let's say, right. After all of that, we come back to a place of second naivete. First naivete is what we had prior to meeting suspicion. Second naivete is what we can return to after suspicion. The thing is that on the other side of encountering suspicion, we can come back to a place of faith and simplicity, but it is going to be it's going to be pockmarked by complexity now, because we have experienced things we didn't experience prior to. And that's where we can lose innocence in a sense and regain it, but we never lose the lessons we learned through the loss of innocence. So we can return to innocence with wisdom. David Bentley Hart says wisdom is the recovery of innocence at the far end of experience. And that's really what it is. It's passing through the stage of suspicion. And it doesn't have to be a philosophical suspicion that we encounter. It can be, I'll just tell you this. I'm a pretty naive person.
Me too.
By default. And I've had to work at being not naive. And I said this last week, like, my dad was a much more worldwide person than me. He grew up in a different environment. He grew up in a different context. I grew up essentially in the Garden of Eden. Great parents, but very protected, and only knew love and protection. I mean, my dad once thought someone had made a comment towards me when I was a young man that was very inappropriate. And this person was an adult who had come to the doors of our church that my dad pastored. And a rumor got to him somehow, some way, that this person had said something to me that was off color. It didn't happen, but it got to him somehow. And my dad, I'm just to know how protected I was. He's playing softball in the church softball league as the pastor. He sees this guy go jogging by the softball field. He jumps the fence and pins him down on the road with the bat. Says, "If you ever come near my family, I'll kill you." I'm just saying, and in the view of his congregants. But that's just, that's how protected we were. I never felt in danger. I always felt safe. My parents loved me. They protected me to the point of maybe going overboard. But my dad had a different, not that his parents weren't that way, but he was exposed to the world in a way that I wasn't. And so I grew up very naive about things. And he had to teach me things. And I didn't learn them through his teaching, but I learned them gradually through experience. And then what he taught me would make sense. And I was like, oh my God, okay, yeah, the world is a little bit more crazy than I thought. Wow, there's actually people out there who want to harm me. Oh my God, there's people out there who not only want to harm me, there's people out there who would take great pleasure in seeing me harmed. Whoa, like those were things that never really dawned on me, because I'm very trusting by nature. I assume the best about everyone. And so I had to have that collision with reality where I saw No, it's not always like that. And then it puts you into this season of disillusionment, where then for a season you might start seeing that everywhere. You start mistrusting everyone. You start thinking everyone has impure motives, or everyone has some other agenda. That's the masters of suspicion. So philosophically, that's what the masters of suspicion teach us, that underneath every philosophy, underneath every teaching, every form of spirituality, there's some hidden motive. None of it's real. It's all just a sham. It's all just a shell game. You can't trust anybody. You can't trust anything. It's all just, bullshit. And that's, really the kind of, well, I would say from the early 2000s into about 2009 or 10, that was really the prevailing view. And especially in the aftermath of 9/11, it was strengthened. The new atheist movement emerged, and I think it was a necessary movement. Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, a lot of these guys, people whose voices
Christopher Hitchens' book,
I deeply value.
The seminal work on the subject, God is Not Great. I would recommend that everyone read that book. It will not in any way negatively impact whatever faith you espouse. But what it will do is broaden your mind out and just change your perspective to allow a larger influx of information and his perspective, which is I've never read anything like it. I thought it was extraordinary. Christopher Hitchens, God is Not Great.
What a tragic loss.
What a tragic loss, so young.
And how sad it is that we don't have him in the era we live in. His way of speaking. I mean, the man could. Look, man. I love my wife, but all I'm telling you is Christopher Hitchens gets me excited when I listen to him talk. I mean, just listening to him talk, I'm like, okay, whew, give me the smell.
Brilliance. It's like it's. I just hope that mind of his is off doing great things elsewhere in the universe.
Yeah, razor sharp wit, turn of a phrase
right here.
Oh my God, yeah. No, God is Not Great. Of the four horsemen of the new atheist apocalypse, as they were called, it was Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. His book is probably the best. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins was good. A little. At this point in my life, there's some things in there I'm just kind of like, meh.
That was a little preachy too, yeah.
It was a little preachy. Anyways, Sam Harris's End of Faith and Daniel Dennett's Breaking the Spell is also fantastic. But yeah, Hitchens by far recommended. But that was the kind of the prevailing view, and then it began to break down. It began to break down a little bit because, well, once you pass through suspicion, you still have this longing for meaning, and you'll never be rid of that. You still have this longing for something transcendent. And so people began to search for it. And I think, to be honest with you, that's why, and I'm not going to get into politics, but I think that's why in 2015, 2016, a political candidate could emerge that could capture people's attention. And I think that's why the political, and if you look at politics, and I'm not trying to be, middle of the road. I'm not trying to be bipartisan. I'm not trying to be anything like that, but I am saying I do try to critique my own side as well. I try not to only critique the other side, but I see both sides have become extremely religious. And I think that's because we lost that greater sense of awe of something larger, and we projected it all onto politics and onto political figures instead of something transcendent. And so instead of holding these individuals to higher standards, we don't have a higher standard. They become the standard to us, and we imbue them with characteristics and qualities they don't possess. And we view them in ways we should not view them because, religion, like the universe, abhors a vacuum. And so when that figure is gone, it's going to find another place to fill, and it filled the political realm. And so the political realm became the religious realm over the last decade. And it's tragic to me. It's tragic to me.
But it won't persist.
It won't.
It will. I think that, not a small part of the population, certainly measurable, but there are religious zealots
Yeah.
among us.
Yeah.
And I feel like really what you came from, when we've talked openly about this, I'm
Mhm.
not speaking out of turn in class tonight. But I feel that there's a significant number of people that have lost their way,
Oh yeah.
and in the process have kicked Jesus Christ to the curb
Yep.
and have chosen instead to worship the fatted cow with the gilded toilet.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting.
Terrified by
It,
it. I am.
well, we're coming up on Easter, and we all know this. Maybe we don't, but it's a famous story at the arrest of Jesus and trial of Jesus, right? Where it's said that there was an insurrectionist named Barabbas, and then there was Jesus, both of whom were arrested, standing trial, doomed to be crucified. And Pilate says that it's a custom at Passover, one prisoner to the people of their choice. And whether or not such a custom actually was practiced, we don't know. We have no record of it other than this. But in the story, that's what's said. And now Barabbas was a violent insurrectionist, a murderer. He was involved in uprisings against Rome, a violent individual. We're told as much. He was a brigand and a thug. Jesus was a man of peace, right? And had done nothing wrong. Had committed no crime. And so Pilate says, okay, so who do you want me to release to you? Jesus, the one who claims to be the son of the Father, or Barabbas? Now, here's the interesting thing. The word Barabbas, Hebrew, Bar Abbas, which means son of the Father. The name Barabbas means son of the Father.
The Father.
So what Pilate asks them is like, which version of the son of the Father do you want? The violent insurrectionist or the man of peace? And the crowd, all in unison, said they wanted Barabbas, the violent version. And that's what they chose. And that's what we chose. That's what definitely the church, I won't speak for everybody, but it seems to me that's what a large portion of the church.
Significant number of people, yes.
Exactly. That's what they chose. And that's because, no, I won't get into it. But but
another time, yeah.
Yeah, another time. But it is important to look at that, because that's where kind of the breakdown starts to happen. We had the loss of meaning, and the new atheism came through. It did its job, it did its work, and it exposed this void of meaning and what happens when there is a void, and because it's almost like there has to be a goal, there has to be a vision, there has to be something that transcends human figures and human systems, or else it will always degenerate in some kind of radical zealotry and fundamentalist utopia, whatever. It'll always become something like that, because whenever you give humans that power, that's what we do with it, right?
Yeah, that's what we do with it. And
yeah.
Religiously,
Yep.
That's what we do with it.
Exactly.
Devoutly, that's
Yep.
what we do with it, which
Yep.
is why how many times have we asked the question, class, what have we learned?
Yep.
What have we learned? This is the paradigm shift.
Mhm.
We are squarely in the midst of it right now.
Yep.
This year will be pivotal, relevant in human history, not just American history, human history.
Yep.
This year will be relevant. And in this year, 2024, I think that things are going to shift and change so radically that it really will be the completion of the paradigm shift.
Yep.
In terms of, this particular element of it anyway, societal change.
Yep.
I am one of many millions of women who are just totally pissed off that we have to fight for our rights for reproductive health care all over again. I did this when I was young, very young. I did this. And, there's a real part of me that says, you know what, ladies, your turn. We already did our thing, okay? You lived for 50 years with the right to bodily autonomy, and it's just been taken away from you. What are you going to do about it? It's, we have a lot of, personally, on so many different levels, I am so filled with rage
Mhm.
that I literally have to talk myself down or call, you or Greta or Lynn, somebody to talk me down off the ledge a few times a week
Mm.
because stuff's happening so quickly that we're lost in this swirling mass, this haze
Mhm.
of misinformation, deliberate disinformation,
Yeah.
lies, outright lies, um, that it begins to become very, very difficult to distinguish what the truth is. And I think that ultimately we have to decide. I mentioned earlier, happiness is an inside job.
Mhm.
Um, how much are we going to allow the outside presence of one thing or another to affect us in such a negative way that it has an impact
Yeah.
on our own personal
Mhm.
happiness? We have to find
Yeah.
that line of demarcation, like
Mhm.
establish our own red line and say, okay, so you can't step over this. All right. You
Mhm.
can't just like lose your mind about this.
Right.
You have to step back, be objective rather than subjective. Don't allow yourself for a moment to feel like a victim. You were victorious before, you will be victorious again. It's almost like self-help,
Mhm.
positalk,
Yeah.
where we literally talk ourselves or communicate with someone who is like-minded enough that they understand the angst, the
Mhm.
anxiety, the fear, the rage, um the all of it. Um, and it's sometimes I think beneficial to just sit quietly for a moment and say, yeah, life's complicated. Yeah, now what's worth fighting for?
Yeah.
And just pick your battles and hone in on
Mhm.
maybe one or two things that matter to you. Write to your congressman, bitch online if you want, all you want. I don't care. I don't
Mhm.
even go on Facebook anymore. All I do is every now and then I'll take an interesting link and I'll put it up right through my phone. I never even look at it otherwise because it has become so toxic. Um, and I don't want to subject myself to that. I don't want to expose myself
Mhm.
to that level of toxicity when only I possess the anti-venom for myself. I can't fix everybody else, and I
Right.
certainly can't change the way other people think. So the only alternative, ultimately, I think the only alternative is for us to heal ourselves
Mhm.
to the extent that we are able, and then to spread that light
Yeah.
out into the world.
Yeah.
I can't think, maybe that sounds simplistic.
No, no, no. I don't think so at all. And I think that's really the problem is that that's what I think what we're not focused on right now. When it comes to the political stuff, I really believe this. I think because we've abdicated, or let's say, because we've let go of um, spirituality, whether we want to call it religion or spirituality or whatever, because we've let go of a belief in something transcendent, something higher than
Mhm.
what we are, however one sees that. Because we've let go of that, we've put the burden of that on people in power, in places of power, and we're expecting them to behave like messiahs. And then we get behind them and they become our puppets with our hands up their backs collectively. In Ion, the book Ion, Young talks about how at different times in history when the climate certain almost like the calls of some will
Jeff, honey, you might want to jump out for a minute and come back in. I do believe that your signal is so jumbled that people aren't able to hear what you're saying. Okay, Jeff will be right back. Bill will take care of it, because that's what they do. They're just so good. But you know what Jeff is saying right now, I think is really important. And I don't want it to be lost in translation through interwebs issues, as it were. So, how you kids all doing? How you doing, huh? Are you taking notes? Are you paying attention? Did you bring me an apple? Because I've got a whole pot of caramel that you can take the apple slices and dip into. Never mind. I was just telling the kids what I really like, which is apple slices dipped in caramel.
Mm,
And I
that
know
sounds
that
great.
that's,
Yeah.
well, yeah, well, it's only half healthy, but half is better than,
This is
not
true.
healthy at
This is
all.
true.
Okay.
It like undoes it. It's like getting a Diet Coke with the quarter
Yeah.
pounder or whatever. Yeah, they cancel each other out.
Yeah. Yeah. We lost the last couple of sentences because it
Yeah.
sounded like you were beaming in from Venus.
Okay. Maybe
So,
I may be for all
and
we
you
know.
might
But,
be. Yeah. Although
yeah.
that's technically my planet. So,
Okay.
I'm a little bit of a turf lord.
Okay. I got you. I don't want to step on your toes.
That's okay. So go
Am
back a
I
little
am I
bit.
still? Yeah.
I was able to
Mhm.
make out enough of what you're saying to know that it's important. I didn't want anybody to miss it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I was just saying I think because we've lost our spiritual inclination, we've let that go. So politics has in many ways taken its place. And so what we would have looked for in a higher ideal previously, whether it was a god, some kind of spirit, whatever, we would have looked for it there. And then these things, the thing about these things is they're untouchable
Mhm.
because they exist out there. They don't exist here. Their tweets from 10 years ago can't get leaked, right? Their emails can't get leaked. We don't see them as corrupted and corruptible because they exist out here. They don't exist right here to where we can find out their dirty little secrets. And so they are permanent fixtures of goodness towards which we can aim, right? And we've taken we what belongs there, we've placed humans there,
Mhm.
right? And we've put all of our force and all of our energies behind these people now because they are in many ways our new gods because we've lost that spiritual inclination, and we're terraforming our planet, our country especially, into a hellscape because of this, because of the transference of the religious and spiritual inclination into the realm of politics. I really do believe this, and I've seen it. I've seen it.
I've seen it manifest too, but I've also seen the
Yeah.
opposite
Yeah.
manifest, Jeff. I
Mhm.
have seen people who were at best skeptical
Mhm.
about religious, their inclinations towards practicing any given religion,
Mhm.
was just, it was not their proclivity, or if it was when they were younger, they left it at a relatively young age, like my friend Cass, for instance. 5
Mhm.
minutes, Bill. Really?
Mhm.
But even atheism is a belief system. It's a
Yeah.
belief that there is
Yeah.
no such thing as God.
Right.
Um, but I have come across so many people in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly, who are finding their way to something meaningful
That's
and
it.
are embracing their spirituality.
Yep.
And maybe it's because I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
an author of paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
And so I am completely surrounded when I
Yeah.
am out in the world by paranormal people. But even though most of them are very spiritual by nature, I have seen a deepening
Mhm.
of their faith
Yeah.
occurring at a time when they believe that they need it the most.
Yeah.
Um,
But sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I
3 minutes.
I I agree with you 100%. And I think one of the things is I think because of the manifestation of what happens when we do it this way, it's caused a breakdown. And so it's causing a return. It's
Mhm.
causing a return now where people are, even if they don't know they're returning, there is a return that's happening. And so that's why the masters of suspicion, I think it's time we replace them with the masters of trust and wonder.
Mhm.
And Paul Ricoeur called the philosophy that these individuals bequeath to us a hermeneutics of suspicion. Hermeneutics just meaning a way of interpreting a text or anything. A hermeneutics of suspicion, and I think it's time now for a hermeneutics of trust.
Yes.
Okay, so in trust, then a hermeneutics of trust that gives way to a hermeneutics of wonder and awe. And it's like, we might think suspicion is our default as a culture, but it's really not, because for the most part, we assumed this broadcast was going to work tonight. We had a little hiccup there when my signal went out for a minute, but for the most part, we were good, and we assumed we were going to be good. We all got on at the same time, except for me, who was a little bit late. But
really, I mean, talk about some revisionist history, man. I trust that you will be on time next week.
Well, I was in the back room on time. I just had to step away for a minute. So, anyways, but the point is, like, for the most part, it does go according to plan, and every now and then there are hiccups, and we actually approach life like that. If I took this phone apart, it wouldn't look like a phone. Okay, but I know this thing is made of tons of constitutive parts that on their own don't comprise a phone. But when I pick it up to use in my hands, I assume it's going to hold together, even though I know it is a collective of things. And that's how we view the world. Every now and then an earthquake might happen, and the ground might open up and swallow up a home. But for the most part, when we step out our front doors in the morning, we step on the ground expecting it to be solid. So our actual approach to the world is one of trust. We do trust, for the most part, that there is a pattern and there is an order of things. And then when we realize that we do operate in trust, that can evolve into awe, because then we can actually live in a state of awe at the fact that there is something here more than the chaos. There is something here more than that of which we should be suspicious. And to me, that is the next step. And that's even in the realm of the paranormal, in the realm of the religious, in the realm of just people getting an interest in philosophy again, in mass. That's why I see it's so encouraging. It's because there was a breakdown in meaning when we lost that sense of spirituality. We saw what it looks like when we project that onto power. Yep. And now there is a return happening. And
it's a beautiful thing. And I knew this would be a wonderful conversation. And you are more than special to me. You are in my heart, but you also grow my brain and you bring me to a higher level of consciousness every moment that I spend in your company. So with that, we'll wish everyone good night. I'm going to be hopping onto a world awakening in a matter of moments. Give my love to the family. I'll talk to you over the weekend.
Yes.
And with that, all that we can say is class dismissed.
Peace.